Okay, it's working?
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, so we will talk about some important issues about games, starting from the point of view of some experts that define the importance of games from the first half of 20th century until now. And the first person that we are going to meet is John Huizinga. It's 1938, and this guy that he was a philologist, and he was an expert about Middle Age era. But he wrote a really important book because in the end, this book starts the studies about games. This book is Homolu Dance, and in this book there are some important things because it was the first time that the game and the playing was considered like something serious, but also something really connected with human being. So this is the first phrase I selected from this book, that is seriousness tries to exclude the game, but the game can very well include seriousness. This is clear. If you think about your own experience, it's clear that when you play a game, you are really committed in it. And this happens, you will understand it when we go deeper and deeper in the presentation. This is really connected to the mechanics that is beyond the games. So the other really important things that we will do during this presentation is that we will try to make a sort of story of definitions that are make to understand better and better what games are. This is the first definition that we will meet. And it's once again from John Huizinga from the same book. And this phrase is, the game is free, and at the same time, it must not be taken seriously. The game is different than real life. It does not create material advantages or winnings. It is based on well-defined rules. It arouses and stimulates social relationships. It adopts fiction, mystery, and the arcane, and it takes place in a limited time. What is really important in this phrase are the starting part of the phrase and the last part of the sentence. The first thing is that the game is free. And it's clear that if you want to play a game, you have to be free to play a game. And this is also connected with the sentence we already find about the seriousness connected to the game. That's because if you are free to participate to a game, you will give all efforts to overtake the quests that are inside the game. And the other one is the last part of the sentence. That's because the game is take place in a limited time. You can you can be inside that game, being really committed in, because there is no consequence out of the game. This is really connected also to the process of placemaking. One of the things that are really important inside a placemaking process is that inside this placemaking process, there is some action that are temporary, meaning, and this is really, really important about placemaking and about gaming stuff too. Passes some years after. This is a sentence by Eugene Fink, that he was a philosopher. In 1957, he argued that playing is not a marginal aspect in the course of human life. It is not a phenomenon that appears occasionally. It is not contingent. The game belongs essentially to the constitution of the being of human existence. It is a fundamental existential phenomenon. Well, this is really important because for the first time, it happens that games are considered as something really, really important, something that make ourselves part of humanity, part of, we are human being because we play. At the same time, because we have a big brain, at the same time, because of other things, but playing is one of the parts that are really essential in human being. 1 year later, it came one of the most important books about gaming, and it is the Game and the Man, and is a book by Roger Collois that in 1958 reveal us which are the mechanics inside the games. And it's really, really important because if you think to do a game, if you think at the process to make a game, it's really important that you take in account the definition, the taxonomy that Roger Collois defines in 1958. First of all, there is an axis in which you can put all the games, and there are two extreme parts of the axis. On one end, there is the paideia, and indicates the carefree, unbridled playing typical of puppies of many animal species, including humans, is the role of the games to understand our limits of the limits of our body, the limits of our brain, and we use playing experience to understand this kind of limits. But it's not the only way that in which we play, because there is another way in which we play that is ludus. Ludus is on the other end of this axis, and indicates serious, rigidly regulated playing, as can be that one of a chess player. This is only human being make games using ludus system. But there are 4 ingredients that are inside this kind of games. When you develop a game, any game, you have to take in account these 4 ingredients. If you take in account these 4 ingredients, you will make a good game. Maybe your game could be use less and less some of these 4 ingredients, but you have to know that these ingredients are there for you. So the first one is Agon. Agon is lead us to put all our ability, whether physical or intellectual, to win a competition. For instance, a race is a game in which Agon is really, really important, because you want to overtake the other guys and you want to be the first one to achieve the goal. But the bigger part of games have inside something connected to Agon. Maybe this Agon could be intended against other players, but it could be intended also against the results that we ourselves have achieved in the past. There is also another one of the ingredients that is really present inside the games is alia. With alia, we deal with the case, the imponderability, the unpredictability of events beyond our control. This is really important. If you think about also in games in which the luckiness, the aleatoric part, there is not. However, there is a little bit connection to alia. I mean, for instance, when you start a soccer match or a football match, you start throwing a coin to understand, to know if you will be the first to play or to choose the side of the field. The other two ingredients of the games are mimicry, that is the test of the mask, of playing another role, of acting differently than usual. And this is really important and is one of the ingredients that are more connected to ludus games. And the last one is e-links. E-links is hard to understand. It is the vertigo that takes us when we let ourselves go to that particular kind of madness that in the game subverts the rules of order and the predictability of the world. I mean, if you are inside a soccer field and you make a shoot, you don't know if this shoot will be a goal, will be out of bounds, and so on. That's particular sensation is e-links, but is also when you make a mistake inside the game is also e-links. And the e-links is really addictive. It's really connected to alia, but it's really addictive because this sensation to don't know what will happen is connected to endorphin and is like a drug, really. And that's because some of the games are quite dangerous. Some of the games can be considered as an addiction to us. This is a scheme to understand what we said once a few minutes ago. Agon and mimicry are more connected to ludus, while alia and e-links are more connected to paideia. But they can be really present in different games. This is another important definition of games. And for the first time, we are meeting some guys that studied continuously gaming system that are Elliot Avedon and Brian Sutton Smith, that in 1971 wrote this book that is the study of games. And they say, they give this definition of game. Gaming is an exercise in voluntary control system in which opposition between different forces appears, confined by procedures and rules in order to produce an unbalanced result. What is important is that once again, the gaming experience must be free. It has to be voluntary. But it's a little bit too small, this definition from my point of view, because it's more connected to Agon, and it doesn't take care about mimicry and other things, and is also connected to an unbalanced result, but many games didn't produce any result. There is not a winner in a lot of games. This is Bernard Switz, that is once again a philosopher, but he really worked a lot in the game framework. And this sentence by Bernard Switz, from my point of view, is the best definition of gaming system, of playing system. Bernard Switz said that playing a game is a voluntary effort to overcome unnecessary obstacles. It's really small definition, but in this definition, there is all the gaming experience. I mean that, this make you clear why we said before that games are really connected with human being. Because if you take care about this definition, more or less all the cultural production is a game. I mean that John Lennon and Paul McCartney, when they make music with the Beatles, they were making a game because they made a voluntary effort to overcome unnecessary obstacles. The voluntary effort was to write a song. The unnecessary obstacles, it was to make a song that have some sense. And there was rules, because music has rules. There was rules because the songs has to be some sense. The word inside the songs has to be some sense. And is, in fact, if you think about English, we say to play a song, or we say to play a comedy or a drama, because playing, the act of playing, is really connected to the 4 ingredients that Roger Collois find out. So also to make a representation is inside the playing framework. And it's really interesting. Also because when you try to make a song, or when you try to write something, for instance, when you try to make a novel, the act of making that novel will have a start and then an end. And there is a framework inside in which you was playing a role at that kind of novel. I mean that if you think about J.K. Rowling making Harry Potter books, it was clear that for her, it was a sort of playing framework. And it was a sort of playing framework given to other people also, because she was playing while writing the book, but the guys that read the book, they are playing too. And it's really interesting for me, this kind of short circuit, because it's clear that if you think of, to the games from this kind of perspective, it's the mood in which you are in that generates playing and game. This is another definition, but is sort of another punctualization, that participation in the game must be voluntary. Anyone who has to play cannot play. And it's really important once again. And it's connected with the commitment of a game. Because if you play for free, you will be committed inside the game. And if you play for free, you will not make any any trying to overtake the rules. You will accept the rule of that game. This is the other important thing that you have to take in account if you want to make a game. So in the end, if you want to make a game, you have to take in account what Roger Collois said. This is one of the framework. So Paideia, Ludus, and then Agon, Elinx, Alea, and Mimicry. But the other thing is the theory of flow. This guy, that is an Indian guy, that is Csikszentmihalyi, his name is really difficult to say, but he elaborated the flow theory, according to which human beings are passionate about an activity if they manage to stay inside the flow. The player's abilities must not allow him to solve the tests too simply, because this will result in boredom, but neither must they prove to be absolutely inadequate to pass the tests, because this generates frustration and anxiety. As the game progresses, the player's skills tend to increase, and consequently, the challenges must adapt. For instance, it's clear that all the study system, the instruction system, works in a way like that. That's because it's clear that if you start to think about really hard things inside a study course, you will understand nothing, and maybe you will leave it. This is the last definition that we are going to meet, is by Sales and Zimmerman. Playing means relating and interacting with the representations that the game itself generates. That it means that when we play a game, we interact with the framework defined by a game. We are completely inside the game. And it's strange, but if you think about to what I mean, it's clear that you cannot play a football match without being in that kind of framework. Because if you play a football match inside, for instance, a university building, and started to act like a soccer player, they think that you are crazy. That's because only in that kind of framework it has sense the player behavior. So maybe we can, to better understand what I mean about Agon, Mimicry, Alea, and Elinx, we can make some example. This is a caveat diagram, multi-criteria diagram to understand better and better something. And we are going to analyze some games that are really common and international. The first one is Monopoly. If you think about Monopoly, there is a big amount of Agon, because everyone wants to win in Monopoly. There is also Mimicry, because in Monopoly you are acting someone. You want to, you are a real estate developer in such a way. There is Alea, because the dice are really present inside the game, and Elinx is not so much present and as ingredient inside this kind of game. This is hide and seek, and we have a very balanced game, because there is Agon, because no one was to be discovered. There is Alea, because the dice are really present inside the game, and Elinx is not so much present as ingredient inside this kind of game. This is hide and seek, and we have a very balanced game, because there is Agon, because no one want was to be discovered. there is mimicry because maybe you think that you are you hide yourself because of a reason. There is alia because you really don't know. Well, there is alia because, however, you have to be fortunate to not to be discovered. But there is also healings because you really don't know if you are playing well. You are alone, and the other guys, you don't know where they are, and so on. This is dice. Dice is very unbalanced game because alia and dealings are the only two ingredients that are really strong inside this kind of game. In fact, there are people that are really committed with the dice, but I think most of the people didn't play dice so often. The end of this presentation is all about the confrontation between analogic and digital world. And this is made by a book that was wrote in 2018 by Baricco. I don't know if it's translated outside of Italy. However, this book is called The Game, and is all around the difference between analog world and digital world. And the center of the book is that digital world has different rules rather than analog one. The analog world describes reality, but by analogies. It means that it makes a copy of the elements using the same rules. All this has advantages and disadvantages. The analog world describes reality by analogies. It means that it makes a copy of the elements using the same rules. Well, it repeats. Furthermore, the world in which representation moves has no external limitations other than those imposed by the instruments. When drawing, the limits are paper and pencil. The analog world is more or less irreproducible unless information is lost, and it's heavy in transportation. In the analog world, the concept of original makes sense. The concept of distribution cannot be underestimated. The digital world generates a reality with different rules than those of the physical world. Digital objects live an existence that is subject to peculiar rules. The digital world is reproducible without loss of information. It is light and immaterial. It has no distribution problems or has very few. Digital world needs a translation to be understood by the analog world because we live inside the analog world and we cannot really understand digital world without some translation. This translation takes place through interfaces that define the a priori dimensions of the translation. The color space, for instance, the color space, this is an example of a monitor is defined a priori and is defined by ourselves, by human being, for human being. We can imagine screens as made up of tiny bulbs. Each of these microscopic bulbs has special characteristics. In this case, we limit ourselves to the RGB color management system, which is the most common to define the color space that defines the representation of the real world in the digital world. RGB stands from red, green, and blue. These are the three ingredients used in the additive synthesis to generate colors. Each pixel can be defined with a value ranging from 0 to 255 in each of the three colors channels that are defined by RGB synthesis. It means that there are at most on TVS television's monitor 255 for 255 for 255 color. That is 16 million and so on. What I say to you is that there are a lot of colors, but there are, first of all, there are only colors that human being can be appreciate. There are not ultraviolet or infrared colors because it has no sense. No one can see them. But, and the other thing is that there are a lot of colors, but there are not really all the colors, because there is a small space between one colors and another colors that it couldn't be described by a monitor. And this is the end of the communication, because the most important thing is that when we are inside the digital framework, we act ourselves as a players. The digital world works for tools that must be understandable through experience. You become more capable of using those tools without questioning how they work. We really don't work how a word processor works. What is behind a word processor? But we use it. And mostly we want that this word processor works, and we want to understand how it works without an explanation of how it works. We make only experience about how it works. No one of us has written a manual of Word, for instance, of Microsoft Word, for instance. Video games works like this. And it's really, really different from what, from the way we are, we normally, until 20 years ago, understand things. And it's different because in digital world, there is no consequence of our mistakes. I mean, if we make a mistake on a slice of paper with a pen, there is a trace of this mistake. If we make a mistake inside the digital world, there is not any consequence. We can go before, we can make as much undo as we need. And it's one of the reasons, because the digital world is really similar to the games framework. The real work works, the real world works in some way on the contrary. We define a theory and we use tools following instructions. Learning does not pass from experience, but from theory. School system works like this. And it's clear, because if you are inside the physical world, there are consequences if you don't follow a theory. If you make a dive without knowing how it works, your body and the diving system, maybe you can be injured by this dive, and so you have to have a theory before. Here there are some games that are that can follow you between this change of meaning from the physical world to the digital world, are the milestone of a trip. This communication ends here with this, so you can find there is the calcetto, I don't know the name international name. There are Flipper, there is Flipper, there is Space Invaders, and there is Asteroids, and in the end, there is Doom. Are 5 ways to play that follow the changing of world itself from the physical world to the digital world. So with these short sentences, I leave you, and I hope it was interesting, and I wait for some question if you have.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yeah, thank you, Davide. It was super nice presentation, and I think very useful also in terms of understanding the game mechanics. So something that I wanted to would be good to know is if you have any questions, guys, or doubts or ideas. No? All right. So I have a question. I would like to ask you, to Davide, but also to everyone, if we should look at the activity that we have done before, the game with the game board, the physical one, looking at that matrix, where would we put it? How would we categorize that? I don't know, Davide, could you share again the matrix? So I mean, I would like to know your opinion, but I don't know if you guys have any idea about that, because these mechanisms are all those mechanisms that are present in any gamification process. So every time that we work, for instance, with even with a phone, with the app that are constantly calling our attention, or they ask us to make activities in order to receive a certain award or tokens, etc. Or every time that we can define our avatar in an app, that's mimicry, for example. So all these things are present in a game, but of course can inform the project that you will develop. So looking at, oh wait, I close here. So I don't know if this activity that we have done, where would we put it? So in terms of mimicry, what do you think? Was there mimicry?
Well, there.
Davide?
Yes.
I don't know.
You do, can you hear me? Yes?
Yes, perfectly.
Yes. So the first thing that we have to understand is that that kind of activities was really short in time. So it was a framework in which it happens something that has no consequence outside of that that particular framework. So this is one of the characteristics of the game, because you could be free to do anything. There are many participatory systems that are based on it. For instance, when you make an open, I don't remember the name. When you make every participatory system, when it ends, it ends. Right. And this is really important. From the point of view of the matrix, it's clear that mimicry was the biggest ingredients that there was in your game, because you could think about yourself to be a planner, or maybe a decision maker, or maybe an inhabitant. So maybe this part of the game, this part of the experience could be more explicit. So you could ask people to act like someone else, like a decision maker, from the point of view of inhabitants, from a point of view of planners, and so on.
Or like an elderly woman.
Oh yes, absolutely. Or like a migrant, or like a lot of different point of view. And
okay.
This is one of the things. It's clear that you can make some Agon system to improve the experience. You can make some E-links experience and some ALEA experience to improve and to make more playable a game. You have a structure, but using this kind of matrix, you can improve that structure. This was the center of my communication.
Okay, so guys, I think that in terms of time, we should close now, and we should let you guys work on the projects. We're going to have in an hour. Today it's a bit like this, it's intense. Tomorrow you will have also more time to work on the projects, no worries. So we're going to have 1 hour, and after this hour, we are going to ask you to each group, start to share with us your ideas, 5 minutes per group. We will also spend 5 minutes to speak, so 6 groups, 60 minutes. And then we will close the session between alphas 5 and 6. So this is more or less. I don't know if you have any questions or doubts, or we should just move to work. Absolutely. During the entire time, we will be here. So whenever you want, you know where to find us. Okay. So, well, Davide, thank you very much.
Okay. See you. I'm here for you. So if you want to ask me something about your games, don't hesitate anytime. Okay?
Thank you.